and ESPN1420.com. Welcome back in to the Bird's Eye View program. I'm Scott Prather. Jay Walker is up in Monroe getting ready for Cajun baseball versus ULM tonight. Of course, we got Cajun softball for you from the Lafayette Regional tonight right here on ESPN1420 and .com. But right now, let's dig into the Saints for a moment with ESPN NFL Nation reporter Mike Triplett, who covers the New Orleans Saints. You can give him a follow on Twitter at Mike Triplett. Check out his stuff over at ESPN.com. Mike, you've consistently said that when it comes to the Saints' philosophy at the draft, they're pretty much a best player available type team. With the selection of Andrus Peat, is that just more proof that kind of validates your opinion?
Yeah, no question. Now, they'll eliminate some positions from their board. My jaw would have hit the floor if they would have drafted Todd Gurley, because they're just so stacked with young running backs that are going to be here for years to come. But I even said before the draft that I thought 6 positions were in play with that first pick and 9 positions were in play in the first round overall. I was a little surprised they went offensive tackle that early, but, a year from now, they could be looking to replace Zach Street, or 2 years from now, and, the cupboard, they'd be looking behind him and the cupboard would be bare. So that pick doesn't bother me, because the whole point of the draft, especially when you're picking that high, is get the player that, when everybody does their redrafts 3 years from now, who's the guy who's going to be in the top 10? If they believe Andrus Peat is going to be one of the 10 best players to come out of this year's draft class, then that's the right pick. And you can't say that investing in an offensive tackle is ever a bad idea. You don't see his path to the lineup right away, or if you do, it means bumping Zach Street out of the lineup. So, it's not the most immediate, help. You love it when the best player available also happens to fill the biggest hole in your roster. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if 3 years from now, everybody's not agreeing that it was a great pick.
Teron Armstead, I've been very high on him, like his play. As soon as the selection came down, he was congratulating Pete, saying, let's go get it. I mean, the Saints still pretty much envision him as their left tackle of the future, right?
Yeah, I think from everything I've been able to gather, the Saints are very high on Teron Armstead. And, maybe one guy's a better left tackle, maybe one guy's a better right tackle. I don't believe there's any plans to move either of those guys to guard. But those 2 guys will probably be the 2 offensive linemen they're building around for years to come, yeah.
Which NFC South team do you think has improved most this offseason?
We just did a roundtable on ESPN.com. All 4 of us NFC South reporters answered that exact question the other day, and 3 of us went with the Falcons. And I said my answer. That doesn't mean I think the Falcons are going to win the division. I picked the Saints to bounce back and go back to 10-6. But I think most of the Saints' improvements are going to come from their own players bouncing back that they already had. Go across the board, Drew Brees and the offensive line, and every player on defense I think will be better. Jarris Byrd. But as far as a team that went out and changed its identity and changed coaches and players in important positions, I really think the Falcons are going to quickly get back to contender status in the NFC South. I think Dan Quinn was a good hire, and I think just the fact that they're so devoted to making that defense work, because they were very much like the Saints last year. That is still an excellent offense in Atlanta, and their defense was one of the worst in the NFL. If their defense becomes halfway decent, then they've got a really, really good team there. And Vic Beasley was a good pick in the first round, and they made we got 4 or 5 guys in free agency that were more second-tier free agents, but they're completely reshaping that defense, which needed it.
Which, barring injury, when you look at the Saints rookie class, how many rookies can you envision actually starting week 1 of the season? And I don't want to say assuming, but just hypothetically, let's assume that none of the current starters really get hurt. Which rookie or rookies can you see potentially working their way into the starting lineup week 1?
Well, since they drafted 6 defensive players, starter is sort of a relative term, because defensive players do so much rotating in and out of the lineup. Like Haoli Kakaha, for example, I'm really high on him and excited to see what he brings to the defense, but I'm not sure that he'll be on the field for first down, or if they'll just use him in their, nickel packages and pass rush packages when they want to have edge rushers on each side. Maybe he plays 40 snaps a game. So, but he's a guy who I'm expecting to get into that rotation right away. Stephon Anthony is interesting because they don't do a lot of rotating at middle inside linebacker. So I do wonder, is he a guy that can come in and challenge David Hawthorne right away for the starting Mike linebacker job, the guy wearing the microphone inside his helmet and getting the play calls? I think that's their long-term vision for him. I'll be really curious to see if he can do that right away, or if not, how they would use him right away. But, boy, I love the athleticism they've injected into that linebacking core all of a sudden. And then you add in Davis Toll, who they got in the 5th round, too, another pass rush specialist. I could see a role for him, kind of like what we saw for Kasim Edebali last year. Who's the other one? Tyler Davison at defensive end, defensive tackle. Maybe a Tyron Walker type of role where he comes in a rotation. P.J. Williams could maybe compete for a third cornerback job or a special teams and dime back job, sort of like what we saw from like a Brian Dixon last year. So I think a lot of these guys can get on the field and help right away. I don't know that a lot of them are going to be every down guys, though.
Mike Triplett, our guest, ESPN NFL Nation reporter covering the New Orleans Saints. Garrett Grayson, obviously when it comes to...
Yeah, he's one that I don't pick to start.
No, right. Yeah, I don't. Barring injury, that ain't going to happen. But the future of the quarterback position, Mike, it's always a topic among Saints fans. And I think I personally, stated very adamantly on my show that, if the Saints are high on Bryce Petty, don't believe any of these reports that he's going in the first round. This is a guy that had a 4th-round grade. This could be smoke screens. Ultimately, I think, whether they were high on him or not, they said they were, but they obviously like Grayson more, which leads me to believe it was smoke screens, and Grayson was sitting there in the 3rd round. I think we all would have been surprised if the Saints had used a first-rounder on him. So I think for a lot of us, it's, look, if a guy's there, don't not take him. It can't hurt, but everybody has a strong opinion about the proper way to eventually replace Breeze. And there, you can go back in NFL history and you can cite every imaginable way possible, that some ways that have worked, some ways that haven't.
You're right.
With regards to Garrett Grayson, what's the ideal situation for the Saints in terms of how long, and does he stick around? Do you see this guy 5 years from now, Mike, being the starting quarterback of the New Orleans Saints?
Well, it's funny. You're exactly right about history. Everybody points to Aaron Rodgers.
How rare is that?
If you tell somebody, you're not allowed to say Aaron Rodgers. Give me the best example of a team that drafted their heir apparent, and when did they draft it? And you're going to sit there and hear crickets, because there is no formula. You can't think of it now. The Packers used to draft all these guys in the 6th round that turned into superstars behind Brett Favre. Matt Hasselbeck and Mark Brunell were 6th-round picks that turned into great players. They weren't out there constantly investing high picks, though. And then the Patriots have done it. They drafted Ryan Mallett, and then they drafted Jimmy Garoppolo. But we don't know that is a successful formula, because, Mallett never played it down for the Patriots, and Garoppolo might never play it down for, well, he will this year.
Yeah, he'll play a couple.
But So you don't know that that's the proper formula. So it really is tough. There's no right answer. And the Saints were right on the cutoff line for me. I think Drew Brees still has a lot of good football left in him. I think he could be a top 10 starter in this league for another 4 years, whether that's with the Saints or with another team. So if they had gone and used one of those top 44 picks that they had, number 31 in round 1 or number 44 in round 2, on a quarterback, I would have been critical. I would have said, well, they've just decided to shove Drew Brees out the door, basically, and put an expiration date on him. So now they're rolling the dice. They waited until round 3, which I think, especially since they had all the picks that they had this year, 5 picks in the top 3 rounds, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it because maybe this guy does turn out to be your starter in 3 or 4 years, especially if you're really high on him, which it sounds like they were. And maybe Drew Brees gets hurt in the next year or two, or, Drew Brees' contract comes up in a couple years and you think he's starting to decline, and you've got another option now. So it's the most important position on the field. I don't mind increasing your options and your variables there. I'm just glad they didn't back themselves into a corner and force enforce something that wasn't there. If they would have taken a Bryce Petty at number 31 or Garrett Grayson at number 31, I think that would have been forcing it. Doing it at 75, I think is probably just smart business.
Mike Triplett, ESPN NFL Nation reporter, our guest. In reference to one of the articles you have up, I'll ask you this question. Last offseason, Champ Bailey got cut. In retrospect, I don't know that it was a shock, but certainly when they signed him, it was unexpected. Several years ago, Saints cut John Stinchcomb. At the time, somewhat surprising when it happened. What player or players do you think could be in danger of maybe being cut in training camp where everybody kind of says, whoa, didn't see that coming?
Yeah, well, if we saw it coming, we'd wouldn't be surprised, right? But no, look.
I know it's a trick question. I mean, there's no way you can win this, but I decided I'd throw it at you anyway.
You mentioned Stinchcomb, and obviously that makes everybody immediately think Zach Street, and they drafted Andrus Peat. That is one of those positions where, if they decide they want to go into this year with Peat and Armstead as their starting tackles, do you keep Zach Street around as a $4 million backup? And maybe they do, because one of the reasons they lost the division last year is because when Teron Armstead got hurt, their backup Bryce Harris really struggled. But obviously that's one you think of just because of the numbers. Tackle is a position where they don't rotate, and now they've got three good ones. And then I mentioned that they don't really do a lot of rotating at inside linebacker. So if Stephon Anthony comes in and looks like a starter right away, what does that mean for David Hawthorne and Donnell Ellerbe? Does one of those guys become a high-priced veteran backup? So those are positions I look at. If a guy's going to lose a starting job, does that mean he loses a roster spot? Because that's what happened with both Champ Bailey and John Stinchcomb. Once they weren't starters anymore, Alex Brown that same year was a veteran defensive end who lost his starting job to Cam Jordan. The same year they cut John Stinchcomb. So you look at a starter, you look at a veteran who, if he gets beat out for a starting job, then all of a sudden he's a pretty expensive backup. That's usually where the surprises come.
Three more for you, Mike. Let's go with this one. Some of the Saints fan base, I guess predictably so, have responded with a bit of anger to the Patriots' Deflategate punishments, the primary reason being that Goodell went way overboard with the Saints' punishments years ago for Bountygate. Again, that's the fan base. And I know some former Saints, Scott Shanley tweeted out a few things, and you can sense the anger and resentment there. How much, if any, does the current Saints team, whether it be Peyton, Loomis, anyone in the front office, a couple of players, actually care about Deflategate, or have they just moved so far on that things happening out of house don't really affect them one way or another?
No, they care for the same reasons that a lot of the fans care. I mean, their livelihood was taken away by, the NFL, and they always questioned the motives of the NFL and wondered, was it because they weren't one of their darling teams, and what if that had happened with the Patriots or the Steelers or the Packers? And so they would definitely keep an eye on it and see, that they give preferential treatment to a team they like better. How can they not? I mean, it's human nature. What happened in Bounty, if the fans are still sore over it, how do you think the people who got suspended for a year and 8 games feel about it?
So wait, you're suggesting that Sean Payton is a little vindictive?
I'm sure that sticks in his craw a little bit.
I had that.
One thing that I've always, I keep saying to the fans, and I'd say it to the Saints too, is you're just going to frustrate yourselves all over again if you compare anything to Bountygate. And it happened, when everybody wanted Goodell to get punished the same way. Ignorance is not a defense during the Ray Rice hearings, and here again, what happened in Bountygate. I mean, a number of things made that over-the-top, absurd level of penalties. The main thing is that it was in the area of player safety right at the time when all the concussion lawsuits were coming out, and the league fell back into a corner like, we need to come down with, all the fire and brimstone on any team because of player safety issues, and we need to be able to say in a courtroom, look how hard we are on player safety. And so I think anything about deflating balls, anything about domestic violence, anything about drug suspensions, even a regular player performance pool that has nothing to do with injuries, You just cannot compare A versus B because that player safety issue completely clouded and blinded Roger Goodell's judgment and made those penalties, I think, as unreasonable as they were.
Oh, you're preaching to the choir, my friend. I mean, a week ago today, I just, it was my first day back after having been out for a little while, and I exactly what you said. And this was before the punishment was announced, but I said, look, prepare yourselves. It's not going to be anything compared to Bountygate, and the more angry you get, like like the commissioner went so far overboard with it, and you gave the reasons why, even with lack of evidence, because of all the lawsuits and player safety and former players and concussions, that if you compare any punishment he ever does to Bountygate, you're always going to be angry. And if you always want to be angry, that's okay. I mean, you can do it. I'm not going to tell you how to feel, but like, at some point, I feel like, I hate to sound like a therapist, but it's better to just kind of move on and leave it behind, because it's like as long as you're comparing punishments to it, you're always going to be ticked off. It's never going. He went so far overboard with it that, Vilma exhausted every possible legal angle, and Paul Tagliabue, of all people, ended up coming out and, he said, oh, what happened was wrong, but based on his findings and basically waiving the suspensions of the players, pretty much without saying it, said, yeah, Roger, you went way overboard with this. So fans that are angry today and will be angry tomorrow and think the Patriots are getting off way too easy while Patriots think they've been wrong, it's not going to make you feel any better. Just focus on today and enjoy the future. All right, two more for you, Mike. Just on the Deflategate thing real quick. What's your personal take on the punishment? Like Bountygate aside, because we've already put that aside. What's your personal take on it, and your personal take on the Pats, let's call it amusing defense that, the deflating balls was just referring to actually deflate as weight loss in regards to one of the two ball boys?
Yeah, I won't pretend to be an expert and the judge and jury on it. I've watched from afar. I could totally understand the desire, especially with New England's track record after all the Spygate issues and stuff, is if there is a sense that they were blatantly cheating, we know the rules, we know we'd get in trouble if we got caught doing this, and we're purposely doing this to get around the rules, then you can come down hard on them, even if it's just deflating air out of a football. The other side, though, I could see to it is, was it Tom Brady just saying, here's how I like my footballs. I like, wear them in as much as you can, get them as deflated as you can, because each team's equipment guys are in charge of the quarterback's footballs. And maybe the equipment guys went too far and said, well, I know how we can get them, even less than 13. We can take air out of the tire after the officials see them. And maybe Brady didn't know they were doing that. So, I could see a lot of sides to this argument, but in this case, I think it probably hurt them that the Patriots had the track record of other, sort of above the law incidents in the past, and it seems like they came down hard on them for not cooperating that well, or in the league's minds, not cooperating enough during the investigation. So I think that all factored into it.
Last question. Mike Triplett has been our guest. Always enjoy bringing him on the airwaves. Great stuff. Again, you can follow him on Twitter at Mike Triplett, MikeTriplett. Head over to ESPN, go to the Saints page. You'll see his stuff all over the place, and a direct link to all of his writings over on his Twitter page. Mike, while you cover the Saints, I guess I got a Pelicans question for you. Mickey Loomis, GM of the Saints, executive of the Pels, has stated that his role with the Pelicans is a little overstated. My question is, do you believe him, and just how much influence do you think this guy actually has?
You know what? I missed the first part of that question. Can you repeat it, Bob?
So when Mickey Loomis says, he stated in the past that his role with the Pelicans is a little overstated, do you believe him, one, when he says that, and just, I guess how heavy or light of a role or influence do you think he actually has with the Pelicans?
Yeah, I think he has a very influential role. I mean, he's the ultimate decider in hirings and firings. I don't think it's a day-to-day hands-on role. I think he does delegate, as far as I can tell. that has been delegated to Dell Demps and Monty Williams in the past, but he's going to be the ultimate decider of who he wants handling the day-to-day operations of basketball. So, I mean, I don't think it consumes all of his time as much as football does in making every decision, but he's very high up in that hierarchy and deciding who is going to be in charge of those decisions.
And if Tom Benson sends someone in the front office of either team a letter congratulating him on a great season and a job well done, should they just start looking for a new job?
Well, I don't know. This was a tough one. Speaking of, you were talking about how Patriots fans and other fans looked at all these punishments. I just following the Pelican season on Twitter, sounds like everybody either loved or hated Monty Williams and Dell Demps, and it seemed to come after every win or loss.
Oh, man, amen to that, my friend. There's no question about it. It's sometimes following Pelican reactions on Twitter is more fun than the actual games, or more agonizing than the actual games, depending on how you look at it. Go check out Mike Triplett's stuff over at ESPN.com, NFL Nation reporter covering the New Orleans Saints. Mike, appreciate the time. Congratulations on child number 3. You got a girl in the mix now, a baby daughter to go with her 2 older brothers. So all the best, man, and we'll probably bother you sometime during training camp if you don't mind.
No problem, not a bother.
All right.